Welcome to LIVEDAF, your online Daf Yomi Shiur.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is Shabbos Daf Kuf Mem Hey. We have 4 lines from the top, and in the midst of our discussion regarding squeezing juice out of fruit. So if one crushes a grape for the sake of extracting the grape juice, that's a malacha. It's a teilada, a derivative of the malacha of dash. Dash is threshing, extracting the grains from their husk, from their encasement. So you're transferring the grains and you're turning it into something edible, from something inedible when it was encased in the husk, in the shell. You're actually changing its status and now turning it into something edible. Likewise, the juice being squeezed out of this fruit is changing you're changing the status of that juice. Initially, it was part of the fruit. It was regarded as a food item because it was part and parcel of the grape. Now you're changing the classification of this matter. You're turning it into a juice, into a beverage, into a mashke. That's considered to be a malacha and related to the malacha of disha. Now Rav taught us a novelty, a chiddush, that if the intended purpose of squeezing the grape juice out of its fruit is not for the sake of the juice, to drink it, it's actually for the sake of a food, of a solid food. He's dripping it into a pot which has a dish, so he's using this juice as an ingredient in that food item, in that dish. It's a mashka habala oichel. That is considered to be oichel as well. This juice is not classified as mashka. The intent is to turn it into a food item. So therefore it doesn't involve a malacha, because you're not changing the status. You're not changing the classification of this matter. Initially it was food, and now as well it is becoming part and parcel of food. Therefore there's no malacha involved here. Continues the Gemara 4 lines from the top. Amar b'Yirmiyah Tanoi. Apparently this concept is actually a machlokes Tanoi. The Mishnah says hamachak b'anavim, this baker who takes anavim grapes and squeezes them on his dough, on his unbaked bread, so that it develops a shiny crust when it bakes. Lo yuchshar. This juice that oozes out of those grapes is not regarded as mashkin, as a beverage, because it's coming for the sake of food, of bread, of a dough. Therefore, even though those grapes came into contact with this juice, they don't become huchshar. Huchshar means when a fruit comes into contact with specific types of juices, mashkin, for instance grape juice, it becomes susceptible and enables it to be makabel tumah. The fruit from now on will be makabel tumah. If it touches something tummy, it becomes tummy. So this juice, according to the Tanna Kama, is not regarded as a beverage, as a mashkin, and therefore the grapes which came into contact with this juice, lo yochshar, did not become enabled for tumah. Rabbi Yehuda hochshar. They did become. Why? Because he regards this juice as mashkin, even though it's coming for the sake of an oichel. Says the Gemara, my lab miflagi. Apparently, should we not say that this indeed is the point of their machlokes? Mar savar, the Tanna Kama holds, mashka balo oichel, a juice which is coming for the sake to benefit oichel. For instance, in this case, it's coming to benefit the bread. Oichelu, it is regarded as an oichel, and therefore does not have the ability to enable the grape to be makabel tumah. Doesn't have the din of a mashkin. Or mar savar. In contrast to Rabbi Yehuda, who holds lav oichelu, although it's coming to help the food, it's not considered to be an oichel, it's considered to be a beverage, a mashkin. And therefore, since it comes into contact with those grapes become hushel kabel tumah. Amra Papa, no. The Kuliyame all agree, mashka bal oichel lav oichelu. Perhaps all hold that even juice which is coming for the sake of oichel is not an oichel, rather it's a mashkin. What then is the point of this agreement in this Mishnah? V'hacha over here, v'mashka bal ibud. Come here, Flaki. They're discussing juice which is going to waste. It's going to be discarded. Why? Because when he smears it on that dough, what's going to happen to the juice? When it gets put into the oven, it's going to dry up, it's going to evaporate. It's going to waste, it's going to be discarded. So the question here is whether this mashkin has a chashivas, has a significance of mashkin. Is it treated like a ordinary beverage, since his intent is to merely smear it on the loaves and have it evaporate? So he's not regarding any chashivas to it, not giving any significance. So perhaps it is, or perhaps it's not. So therefore the machlekes here is mar savar mashkehu. Rabbi Yehuda says, despite the fact that it's about to evaporate, it is still considered to be a mashke. Or mar savar lav mashkehu. Tanna Kama holds, since it's going to dry up and evaporate, it's slated for drying up. You can't consider this to be a mashke. This machlokes regarding a mashka which is slated for ibud, is going to be wasted, is going to be discarded. This machlokes is compatible with another machlokes, which seems to be based on this concept as well. This sign is going to the Brisa. One has zaysim, olives, and he crushes them, he bruises them. With hands that are tummy. And the point here is to aid in their, Rashi says, the crushing and the juice, the oil which oozes out, somehow enhances the flavor of these olives. Huchshar. So therefore, the olives become hushal kabatuma. This juice is regarded as proper mashkin, since he likes them. He wants the juice to come squirting out of this olive. Therefore, it is regarded as mashka and is machsher those olives for tumah. However, if he crushes them simply because he wants to layer them with salt, so he needs that the salt should catch onto the zaysim. So he bruises them somewhat so the salt should catch on. So he has no kavana, no purpose in this juice, in this oil that is oozing out. Lo yorshar. So we don't regard the oil as mashkin, and those olives do not become susceptible to tumah. The third case is leidai migyu zaysav limsaik imlav. So he's squeezing the olives in order to determine whether the time of harvesting has come. So he's squeezing the oil out to see how easily the oil comes out. So he wants the oil because it's an indicator of the state of the ripeness. But the oil is going to evil. It's dripping down on the floor. It's being discarded. So the question here is that considered to be a mashkin? So the Tanakama holds, lo yoshar. This is not considered to be a mashkin. It's going to waste. And it has no chashivas of a beverage. And therefore, the zaysim, although they are in contact, they touch this juice, they don't become hushal kabatum. Rabbi Yudah mehuchshar. Yes, it does become hushal, because he holds that even this type of juice, which is going liibud, is regarded as mashkin, and therefore it is machshir those zaysim for tumah. My lav boka mifliki. Shall we not say that this indeed is the basis of their disagreement? Mar sava rabidol mashka imid ibud mashku. The juice which is slated for wasting, for ibud, is considered to be mashkin. Mar sava Tanakama holds la mashku. It is not considered to be mashkin. So we found another pair of Tanoim who disagree regarding this concept of a juice which is going to be discarded, whether or not it has a chashivas, a significance of a mashke. And in fact, Rabbi Yehuda, who maintains in this most recent brayse that even a mashke which is going liibud is considered to be, has a chashivas of mashke, is very much compatible with his own opinion stated earlier by that baker who is crushing those grapes, where Rabbi Yehuda tells us that juice is considered to be a mashke despite the fact that it's about to dry up and evaporate. Omar of Huna Beit Rishua, Hari Tanoi, you write regarding the second brayse. This most recent brayse, these Tanoim are indeed disagreeing about this point. But mashka imid liibud pligi. The machlokes is regarding mashka which is going liibud. However, regarding the first machlokes Tanoim, I disagree. V'hanach Tanoi, the first set of Tanoim regarding that baker, b'mashka imid letzach tzachai kemefligi. They're not discussing juice which is going to be discarded, which is going to be wasted, going to ibud. Why? Because Rav Huna ben Yeshua holds that there's no wasting going on. That juice is being absorbed in the dough there. It's lingering. It's sticking around. It's not going to ibud. It's adding the shine. It's being used. There's no ibud whatsoever. So what then is the point of contention in that first machlekes? What is the svaras hamachlekes? The disagreement there is, since this juice is not going to be consumed in a usual manner, you're not drinking it, you're not dipping into it, you're simply using it to add shine to the crust. That's not the typical standard way to use juice, to use a beverage. The question there is, in this case, whether this juice is regarded as a toiras mashke. Is it treated like a mashke, like a beverage, since he intends on using it simply to add shine to his crust? So that's the point of the machlekes. Tanakama holds. No, Rabbi Yehuda holds it is considered to be a mashke, despite the fact he's merely using a letzach to shine his bread. But it's unrelated to the question of ibud. So in summary, we learned about mashke, which is bal oichel. it's coming for the sake of a solid food, Rav says, is ka'echel dami. Regarding mashke, which is bali ibud, we have a machlekes. Regarding balat tzachtzachai, likewise, we have a machlekes. Continues the Gemara, Amar Rav Zera, Amar Rav Chia, Bar Ashi Amar Rav. Once again, the same halacha of bala oichel, soichet adam eshkel shanavim, one may crush a cluster of grapes, l'seicha kedera, into his pot, because it is bala oichel, is coming for the sake of food, and it is not considered to be a malacha. Ava lo l'seicha kara, but he shouldn't do it into a bowl, in which case it does not have a din of a oichel, and as Rashi told us earlier, since it doesn't appear obvious that he's using it for the sake of food, so you shouldn't squeeze it into a ka'ara. We treat it like it would be a mashka, and it involves a malach. Continues the Gemara. V'doglet siroi. What about squeezing a fish to extract its brine? Afilo secha ka'ara. You can do this even to a bowl. Why? Rashi explains because the tzir, the juice which is being extracted from this juice, is not considered to be a mashka. It has a din as an oichel. Perhaps since it wasn't customary to squeeze fish for its juice, for its brine, therefore we don't treat it like a mashka. Or perhaps since the brine is so heavily loaded with the extraction of the fish itself, of the fat, of the essence of the fish itself, it's like liquefied food almost. Therefore, we don't regard it as a mashka. Rather, we simply consider it like he's separating two parts of the oichel. Therefore, there's no change of status. You're not reclassifying this matter from food to beverage. There's no malacha of disha taking place. So this was the chiddush of Rav. Says the Gemara, Yasser Rav Dimi. Rav Dimi was sitting, and he was saying over this halacha in the name of Rav, that one may squeeze the fish for its brine. Amalei Abayla Rav Dimi. So Abaye told Rav Dimi, Atun, you mishmei Rav masnisin lo. You have quoted this halacha, you have learned this halacha in the name of Rav. Therefore, you have nothing difficult regarding this halacha. It all works well and fine. Anan, however, us, mishmei de shmo masinila, we learned this halacha of squeezing the dog for its tzir, for its brine. We learned it in the name of Shmuel, v'kashalan, and this resulted in a difficulty. It posed a kasha for us. Why? Mi amar Shmuel dog l'tziroi. Can Shmuel then say that squeezing the dog for its tzir is muta afilu techakara? Did Shmuel really say that? It's considered like separating food from food, and is not related to the malacha of disha. We find a contradiction in Shmuel himself. But Itmar, haven't we learned? Kvashim shesachtan. Kvashim are pickled vegetables. Rashi says they used to soak them in wine and in vinegar. So we have pickled vegetables that contain some liquid inside them. Shesachtan. And he went ahead and squeezed them and crushed them. Amar Rav, lugufan mutter. If the purpose here was lugufan, for their own sake, he's trying to dry them from their liquid, because he wants to eat the vegetable themselves. He has no intent to extract the juice for the sake of the juice. He wants to do lugufan for their own sake. Or he wants to soften them a bit. That's why he's squeezing them. And it's mutter, despite the fact that there's some juice oozing out of it. He's not doing a malacha, he's simply trying to enhance the vegetable itself. Lime meyan, but if his intent is to extract the juice from this pickled vegetable, so it's not a malacha. Why not? So Rashi says, since the juice therein is not a natural phenomenon, the juice is merely as a result of the pickling process. It wasn't there initially, it wasn't part and parcel of this vegetable. So it's a foreign matter which was embedded in this vegetable. So extracting that is very dissimilar to extracting juice from a grape. Therefore it's not a malach. Potter. Aval osir, but don't do it. Why? Rashi says, because if he does this, he might confuse this with extracting grape juice from a grape. So you might meant to do this, but if he does it, he's potter, it's not a malach. So this is regarding what? Kvashim. Pickled vegetables. Ushlakos, however, boiled vegetables. If he wants to squeeze those vegetables, bein legufan, whether his intent is for the vegetable itself, bein lemameyan, whether his intent is for extraction of the juice, he wants to make use of the juice, vegetable soup, mutter. In this case, it's even more lenient. He may do so. Why? As Rashi says, the juice of a vegetable, of a boiled vegetable, a cooked vegetable, is regarded not as mashke. Rather, we treat it like food. It has a ger, a status, is classified as food. We learned in the brachas as well, vegetable soup. It absorbed the flavor of the vegetable to such an extent that we regard the liquid of this vegetable tantamount to the vegetable itself. It's classified like a vegetable. And it is not regarded as juice. It has a din of oichel, so you're simply separating two parts of the oichel, two parts of the food item, therefore it's mutter. So once again, to crush, to squeeze the pickle juice, if he's doing it legufan, for its own sake, to soften the vegetable itself, that's mutter. If his intent is to extract the juice, it's not a malacha, but he shouldn't do it. Regarding boiled vegetables, he can do it in any case. Ushmol amar, echad kvashim echad shlakos. Whether he is squeezing the pickled vegetables or squeezing the boiled vegetables, legufan mutter. If his intent is to soften the vegetable itself, for instance, it is mutter. Limei meyan. But if his intention is to extract the juice from the pickled or boiled vegetable, patav al aser, it's not considered a malacha, because again, we're speaking about foreign matter, which was embedded in this vegetable. It's not naturally occurring moisture or juice, and therefore extracting it is not related to the malacha of disha, but it's aser, apparently according to Shmuel. In both cases, even in the boiled vegetables, we consider it to be similar to fruit juice, and don't do it lest you go ahead and actually squeeze a fruit. Now, the shlakos, as Rashi explained, the juice of the shlakos is regarded as oichel. You're separating two portions of a food item. Nevertheless, Shmuel tells us, don't do it. So apparently, getting back to the case of dog litziroi, squeezing that fish to extract its brine, where likewise, earlier we considered that to be simply separating two parts of a food item. The tzir, the brine being extracted, was not regarded as a mashka, rather was an oichel. So apparently, according to Shmuel, it tells us that extracting the juice from the boiled vegetables, despite the fact that that's regarded as an oichel, may not be done, he would hold the same halacha, he would apply the same isser to squeezing a fish to extract its brine. So this is Abaye speaking. We quoted that halacha, that allowance, to squeeze the fish in the name of Shmuel, thereby resulting in a seeming stira, contradiction between that Shmuel who allows and the Shmuel by us who tells us that one cannot go ahead and separate the juice of these boiled vegetables from the vegetables, despite the fact that he's simply separating food from food. So once again, Shmuel says, even shlakos legufan mutter l'memein aser, l'memein patav al aser. So there's a contradiction. So this is Abaye speaking to Rav Dimi. He said, well, you are quoting Rav, we quoted Shmuel, and we have something difficult. Amar later, Rav Dimi responded, my version is correct. Holekim is the name of Hashem, a lashon of shvuah, of swearing. Einai ro'uv loizar. My own eyes saw. Meaning, I experienced this firsthand. Mipumi de Rav Yirmiyah Shmili. I heard this from the mouth of Rav Yirmiyah. Rav Yirmiyah Rav Zera. He heard it from Rav Zera. Rav Zera Rav Chia bar Ashi. Rav Zera heard it from Rav Chia bar Ashi. Rav Chia bar Ashi mei Rav. He heard it directly from Rav. Indeed, this halacha, which I had quoted, is meant to be related to Rav and not to Shmuel, and therefore there's no contradiction whatsoever. Gufa, so we actually just learned, kvashim shesachtam, pickled vegetables, which he would like to squeeze, amarav, lugufan mutar, if he's doing it for its own sake, to soften, to dry the actual vegetable, without any intent of extracting the juice, mutar, he can do that. Limei meyan, if the purpose is for their juice, patav al asar, it is not a malacha, but he shouldn't do it, lest he go ahead and squeeze a grape, for instance. Or shlakos regarding boiled vegetables, there's no concern whatsoever. As we explained, the juice there is regarded as an oichel. It's just a liquefied food. Therefore, bein legufan, whether for the sake of the vegetable itself, bein lemein, whether he's squeezing it for the sake of the juice, mutter, it's perfectly allowed. Ushmuel amar, echad zeh, whether picked vegetables or cooked vegetables, legufan mutter. Indeed, legufan is no problem, but lemein, if the intent is to extract the juice, pater aval asr. Now we have a third sheet. Rabbi Yechon Amar, echad kvashim, whether pickled, v'echad shlakos, whether boiled, legufan matter. Indeed, if he's doing it for the sake of the vegetable itself, he's squeezing it to dry it, to soften it, that's okay. Limei. But if his kavanah, if his purpose is to extract their juice, chayav chatos. So Rabbi Yechon is very machmir. He holds that we equate this to your typical juice extraction from a fruit, extracting the grape juice from the grape. Because according to Rabbi Yochanan, the fact is that this juice, which is being extracted from the pickle juice, from the pickled vegetables, or the boiled vegetables, even boiled vegetables, we regard that juice coming out like mayim, like water, like liquid. Why? Because initially it was a liquid, it was a beverage, before it went into the cooked vegetables. So Rabbi Yochanan maintains that its status remains the same. We still regard it as a liquid, and extracting this liquid from the vegetables is tantamount to extracting liquid from a fruit, creating juice from a fruit, from a eichel. That is a malach of disha. So he holds that kvashim and shlakos, apparently it was customary to squeeze them for their juice, and therefore we regard this mashke as legitimate beverage, as a maisa of schita, and therefore it's chayiv chatas. Says one Meisei a kasha from the following brisa. This will be a kasha on all the opinions. Rav Shmuel Rav Yochanan. Brisa says, "Soichtin kvashim b'Shabbos l'tzorech Shabbos." One may squeeze pickled vegetables on Shabbos if its purpose is l'tzorech Shabbos, so he needs it today. Aval loy l'motzei Shabbos, but he shouldn't do it for the sake of motzei Shabbos. Continues the brisa, "V'zeisim b'anovim, olives and grapes lo yischat." He should not squeeze them. V'imsachat chayiv chatas. So he shouldn't squeeze them at all. Apparently, he shouldn't even do it legufan if he wants to soften them, because since if he goes ahead and squeezes them for the sake of their juice, certainly it would be chayiv chatas, because the juice coming out of Zayis and Vanavim all agree involves a malacha. So in first speak out, he shouldn't even go squeeze them legufan to soften them, since it is customary practice to go ahead and crush Zayis and Vanavim. So there's a concern if he does it even for the sake of softening the fruit, he might go ahead and squeeze it for the sake of the juice, in which case it's a malacha, so he shouldn't get involved in squeezing them all together. Now what's pertaining to us is that this seems to be a kasha on all shittas. Why? Because the brisa tells us that one may go ahead and squeeze the kvashim, the pickled vegetables, and the brisa doesn't differentiate between whether his kavan is legufan or lemeimein. Apparently, even if his intent is to extract the juice from these kvashim, is perfectly allowed. Says the Gemara, kasha l'Rav. This is a kasha on Rav, who tells us that one may not squeeze kvashim for the sake of their juice. It is kasha l'Shmuel, who says likewise that it's asur, and kasha l'Rav Yochanan, certainly on Rav Yochanan, who maintains not only is it asur midrabanan, it's asur min atur. Says the Gemara, all three Amirayim will interpret the brisa according to their respective opinions. Rav Metaretz, Rav will interpret the brisa l'tamei according to his shita. Shmuel Metaretz according to l'tamei according to his shita. Rav Yochanan Metaretz l'tamei. Explains the Rav Metaretz l'tamei. Rav will interpret the brisa according to his view. The brisa is teaching us as follows: Soichtin kvashim b'Shabbos tzorech Shabbos. One may squeeze pickled vegetables on Shabbos if his intent is to use it on Shabbos. Aval lo mitzvah Shabbos, but not if he's preparing for Matzah Shabbos. When is it said lugufan? If his kavanah is for the sake of the vegetable itself. But if his kavanah is to extract the juice, pataval aser. Certainly one might not do that, because he might confuse this with ordinary fruits, in which case it would be a malacha. Therefore, he meant to refrain from doing this. Shlakos, however, boiled vegetables, that's a notch lower. That's a step down. Why? Because as we explained, the juice being extracted from those boiled vegetables are classified as oichel. Says Rav, shlokos bein legufan bein lemein, whether his intent is for the vegetable or for the juice, motor, there's no concern whatsoever. And the brisa concludes with v'zeisim v'anovim, olives and grapes, lo yischet, he should not squeeze him sachtan, but if he does so, chayev chatas. So this is Rav's opinion, that when it comes to kvashim, he can only squeeze them legufan, but not lemein. Shlokos, you can do either way. Shmuel, says the Gemara, metaris l'tamei, he will interpret the brisa according to his opinion. The Brisa teaches us soichtin kvashim b'Shabbos l'tzorech Shabbos. He can squeeze the pickled ones on Shabbos for the sake of Shabbos. V'odin l'shlakos. Likewise, shlakos have the same category. Shmuel doesn't differentiate between one type and the other. That's only if he's intending to aid and benefit the vegetable itself. He's doing it for its own sake. But if his intent is to extract the juice, patar vel aser, one may not do so, whether they are pickled or boiled. Olives and grapes, he should not get involved altogether in crushing them, if he squeezes them, chayiv chatas. So this is Shmuel telling us that kvashim and shlokos are classified together. Legufan is mutter, lememein is asam draban. Rav Yochanan says the Mamatayis litamei. He will interpret the Brisa according to his opinion. The Brisa teaches us seichet and kvasim l'tzorech Shabbos. One may be seichet kvashim, the pickled ones, for the sake of Shabbos, avaloi l'matzor Shabbos, but not for after Shabbos. Echad kvashim, v'echad shlokos, whether pickled or boiled vegetables. V'amedva amrum legufan. This is only said if he's squeezing them for their own sake, but if he's trying to extract the juice, lo yischait, he shouldn't do that. V'im sachat, if he proceeds, nasa k'misha sachat zeisim v'anovim. It is regarded as though he squeezed legitimate fruit, zeisim, olive, v'anovim, and grapes, v'chayav chatas. So that's the conclusion of the Brisa, that if one proceeds and crushes the pickled and the boiled vegetables for the sake of their juice, he has done a malacha. It is equated to crushing grapes and olives. So in summary, we learned regarding squeezing different items, and we have three shittas. We have Rav, we have Shmuel, Rav Yochanan. Now, three classifications. We have vegetables which are kvashim, pickled. We have shlokos, boiled. The Gemara tells us that in this category also fits the dog squeezing that fish for the sake of its brine, because in both cases you are separating, according to some shittas at least, you're separating food from food. Then we have finally zeisim v'anovim, your standard fruits. Now let's begin with the easiest one, which is zeisim v'anovim. If he's squeezing them l'gufan, it's aser. If he's doing it l'meimehen, surely it's chayiv chatas, and this is agreed upon by all shittas. Now let's get back to kvashim. We have three shittas: Rav, Shmuel, Rav Yochanan. So Rav holds pickled vegetables, kvashim. He can squeeze them l'gufan to soften them, to dry them. So l'gufan is a recurring theme throughout. All agree, Rav, Shmuel, Rav Yochanan agree, that whether pickled or boiled, if he's doing it l'gufan, is completely mutter. So Rav holds l'gufan is mutter. If he's squeezing those pickled vegetables to extract their juice, it's aser, lest he confuse it with fruit juice. What about shlokos? The boiled vegetables, l'gufan is mutter, l'meimein is mutter as well, because he's simply separating food from food. According to Shmuel, kvashim l'gufan is mutter, l'meimein is aser, like Rav. In shlokos, he holds the same. L'gufan is mutter, l'meimein is aser. Rav Yochanan is a chiddush. He holds kvashim l'gufan is mutter, but l'meimein, we consider that an extraction of juice from food. It is chayiv chatas. Shlokos likewise. L'gufan is mutter. If he's extracting l'meimein, we regard this as though he's extracting a mashke from mo'echel. He's changing the status. The classification of that liquid, of that beverage, he's turning it from food to mashke, and it is equated with the malacha of disha, and he's chayiv chatas. Continues the Gemara. Omar Rav Chia bar Ashi, this is 3 lines from the bottom. Omar Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav. Dvar Torah, meaning min ha-Torah, ein chayiv. He's only chayiv ella al drisas, or al drichas, some say, crushing, zeisim v'anav milvad, only for crushing olives or grapes. Only that is considered to be schita, malachav disha, because it is customary. It is the usual thing, a standard, to crush these types of fruits for the sake of their juice. But other types of fruits and vegetables, Rashi says, lav or chai bachi, it's not the derech to crush them, and therefore the juice which is extracted is not really regarded legally, halachically, as a mashke with regard to the malacha of disha. Likewise, you learned in the Brisa, Bnei Menashe, Dvar Torah, Bnei Torah, ein chayiv, ela al drisa zeisim v'anav milvad. And the Brisa continues with one more halacha, which seems to be a bit unrelated. The halacha is ve'ein eid mipi eid kasha, ela be'eid leidisisha bavad. So an eid mipi eid means that if one witness testifies, he testifies with information that he heard secondhand, he got it from another witness. It's an eid mipi eid. So generally we don't rely on this type of eid. We can't do a din Torah based on this type of testimony. However, it is kosher, it is acceptable for Eidas Isha Bavad. Rashi explains Eidas Isha is to permit a woman to remarry. Her husband left town, and an aide comes along and says, I have this information, second-hand information, that he had passed away. We accept that, rely on that, and we allow her to remarry. There's a leniency applied in this case, since we don't want to stay in a state of limbo. Continues the Gemara. Iboilu, so they ask the following question. Eid mepi eid. This concept of second-hand testimony. Le'edus b'choir mau. What about using this type of edus for b'chor? Rashi explains that a b'chor, which is a firstborn animal given to the kohen, he needs to wait for a mum to appear, a blemish to allow using this animal outside the Beis Hamikdash. Now the Gemara in B'chor tells us that the Kohanim were not trusted in this matter. They were suspected of actually inflicting the wound, doing it on their own because they wanted to eat this animal. So the kohen can only use it, the animal that has a mum, if he brings an aid. Somebody will testify that this mum showed up naturally. It wasn't brought about by the kohen. What if we have an eid mepi eid who's testifying second hand? Again, eid mepi eid leidus b'chor, regarding the testimony of b'chor. Ma, what is the halacha? Do we rely on it or not? Rav Ami Aser, he says no, you can't. Rav Asi Shari, he allowed. Amle Rav Ami Rav Asi. V'atane de Menashe. Haven't we learned in the Tana de Menashe eid mepi eid kosher ela leidus isha b'vad? So we only apply this sort of testimony to an Eidus Isha. How could you say that even regarding Eidus B'chor, this is acceptable? Says the Gemara, Ema explains, say like this, Le'edus she'isha ksherla b'lvad. Torah de Menashe meant to say that we accept second-hand Eidus for any sort of testimony which is not a serious testimony. It's not regarded min Torah like an Eidus. For instance, any sort of testimony where even an Isha, who's generally not regarded as a valid witness, even an Isha is relied upon. For instance, the case of permitting an Isha to remarry, where we believe even words coming from an Isha can testify. Likewise, when it comes to B'chor, we learn in the Gemara B'chor that even an Isha is kosher to testify for that. So that's what Tana Dasha means. They mean that you can rely on second-hand testimony for any type of Eidus where an Isha is acceptable. So likewise, second-hand Eidus is fine. Continues the Gemara. Rav Yemar, Achshar Eid Mepi Eid B'chor. He accepted the second-hand Eidus regarding a B'chor. Korele Meremar. So Meremar was displeased with this, and he referred to Rav Yemar as Yemar Shari B'chor. Yemar, who permits a B'chor. V'hilchasam, we conclude Eid Mepi Eid, a second-hand Eidus is kosher l'B'chor as well. Continues the Gemara Chalis Dvash. So Mishnah told us that the chalas dvash, which are the honeycombs, which are crushed before Shabbos, and the honey is flowing out on Shabbos. Tanakam says Asr, Blazer says it's mutter. Says the Marki Asr B'Aisha, and B'Aisha came from Minarda, from Narda. Also he came, V'Aisi Masnisa B'Yada. He brought along this brisa which says Zeisim V'Anovim Shiriska Me'er Shabbos. So this is not only what it says in the Mishnah regarding honeycombs. He presented a halacha regarding olives and grapes, Shariska Me'er Shabbos, which he had already crushed from before Shabbos, V'yotzim Atzman, and the juice is simply flowing out on its own, Asurin. One cannot partake, can benefit from that juice. Why? Because we're concerned that perhaps he's going to go ahead and squeeze the Zeisim V'Anavim themselves, so he can't benefit from the juice. Reb Lezer, B'Shim Matir, they hold one can go ahead and benefit from the juice which is simply flowing out on its own. So this was the brisa presented by Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef, what's the chiddush here? What are you coming to teach us? Gabri Yisera Asla Shminan? Is he coming simply to add another name into the picture? We already know that Reb Lezer allows this type of benefit. One can enjoy the honey which is flowing out from the crushed honeycombs. So it seems like Rav Yosef is simply coming to add another name to the cause. He's saying not only Reb Lezer allows, Reb Shimon allows as well. Is that all he's coming to teach us? Another name? Amalei Abaye. So Abaye responded, no, actually, Tuva Kamashman. He's coming to teach us a great halacha, a great chiddush. Because he is teaching us not only honey is mutter, even ordinary fruit juice would be awesome. Even masnisen, havamina, if only from our Mishnah, perhaps our thing I would suggest. Hasamhu, over there by the honeycombs, the mikara uchla, basayf uchla. The honey, initially when it was in the honeycomb, was classified as food. Basayf uchla. Ultimately, after it oozes out, after it flows out, it still retains that food status. It doesn't change. It's not classified as something else. It retains its food status consistently throughout. So therefore, minat Torah, there will be no isser in actually even crushing those honeycombs, because you're not changing the classification of the content within. It begins an oichel and ends an oichel. It's only midrabana you can't do that. So perhaps over there, we're not so machmer. If you crushed it before Shabbos, and lets it flow out on its own, you can go ahead and use it on Shabbos. Because there's no concern that perhaps if you allow this, perhaps it'll go crush a honeycomb. It's only Ism D'Rabbanan. We're not so mach. But in our case, where the juice is coming out of not a honeycomb, but grapes and olives. The Mikara Oichla, initially, the juice was part and parcel embedded in the food, was classified as food. Ubasef Mashke. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it is a mashke. So the classification is changing, the status is changing. In which case it would involve Issa D'Oraisa to extract that juice from the food to change the status from food to liquid. So perhaps, perhaps, even in this case when the food was already crushed before Shabbos, we are not allowed to use the juice coming out of this fruit. Why? Because perhaps if you allow this, then it might lead him to actually crush uncrushed fruit, which is Issa D'Oraisa. Perhaps this would not be allowed. According to Rabbi Lezer, Kamash Malan, therefore Vesha teaches us, no, that's not the case. Rabbi Lezer and likewise Rabbi Shimon allow even using the juice exuding from, flowing out freely, flowing out of the crushed grapes or olives. There's no concern whatsoever. Surely, crushing uncrushed grapes involved Issa D'Oraisa, but these are already crushed from before Shabbos, and they hold that it is not customary, it's not the derech to go ahead and get yourself involved in re-crushing those crushed fruit. Therefore, there's no concern whatsoever. Whereas according to Rabbanon, they don't allow this because they're concerned that perhaps he'll go ahead and resume the crushing process even on the crushed fruit. Continues the Gemara. Kol sheba b'chamin me'erev Shabbos, any food which is already brought into hot water, meaning it was already cooked before Shabbos, Shiur oiseh b'chamin b'Shabbos, one may go ahead and immerse it, let it soak in hot water on Shabbos. It was already cooked before Shabbos. V'chol shelo ybo b'chamin me'erev Shabbos, something which was not pre-cooked, madichin oiseh b'chamin b'Shabbos, one may rinse it using hot water. There's no concern of bishul, except for some items. Chutz, except min hamaliach hayoshen, this aged fish. Rashi says it's at least 1 year old, so it's salted, aged fish. The kulis hayaspanin, this is also a salted fish, Spanish mackerel. So these are different. Why? Shadachosam. Merely their rinsing, zuig marmalachtan, is regarded as the finishing touches of these items. These things become edible merely as a result of them being rinsed with hot water. So merely rinsing it is tantamount to cooking, has the halach of bishul. Therefore, you can't rinse them with hot water on Shabbos. Continues the Gemara. So the Mishnah began as something which was already cooked, may be soaked in hot water on Shabbos. Kigoyin mai. For example, what are we speaking about on Rav Safra Kigoyin? Tarnagota de Rav Abba. This chicken of Rav Abba. So in his home, in his household, it was customary for them to cook a chicken and then soak it for a prolonged period of time in hot water, so it dissolves. And Rashi says they would eat it for medicinal purposes. There was one time which I encountered. I came there, I visited their home there, and they fed me, they served me from this dissolved chicken, and I was so repulsed as a result of that. If not for the fact that Rabbi Abba, he came through in the clutch, Ashkayan Chamra, he fed me, he gave me to drink high quality wine, Chamra, high quality wine, Bartlosa Tarfi. So it's wine, Chamra is wine, Bartlosa Tarfi, which grew 3 sets of leaves, meaning it's 3 years old. It was high quality wine. Matter of fact, that he came to the rescue, nasi is lashon of oines. I would have been compelled to vomit as a result of my repulsed state. So this is something quite repulsive. Continues the Gemara. Rav Yochanan, Rayik, he would spit out of disgust. Mikutach the Bavloi, when he recalled the concept of the kutach, this certain type of dip, the Bavloi, this Babylonian dip, he was repulsed from it. Rav Yosef took slight offense here that the people of Eretz Yisrael negated or repulsed by the Babylonian dishes, Babylonian food. So he responded, he said, V'leir kanon, as well we can spit mitarnagolta de Rav Abba, from this tarnagolta Rav Abba, which is not really too appetizing either. So Rabbi Yosef, who was Ben Bavel, says, we can respond likewise regarding this dish that they serve in Eretz Yisrael. V'oit, additionally, actually, kutach habavli is not so terrible. Why? Amar Rav Gaza said, Zimna Chada, there was one time he Yiklais Lahasam, that I came to Eretz Yisrael. V'av this kutach the bavloi, and I prepared this kutach the bavloi, this dish, and it was so attractive. She'ilu minei kol brichei Marava. There was such a high demand that all the brichei Marava, brichei means the sick, the ill people of Marava, of the west, of Eretz Yisrael, they asked them for a portion. So apparently, it's not so terrible, and many people actually find it to be appetizing. Continues the Gemara, Kol Shaba Leiba B'Chamin. The Mishnah tells us that these specific types of fish, salted fish, may not be even rinsed with hot water on Shabbos because it is regarded as a malacha bishul. Generally speaking, rinsing does not accomplish bishul, but when something only requires this minimal amount of bishul, so it's all relative. This is considered to be an act of bishul pertaining to this specific item. So if a person actually rinses it, has he done a malacha d'oraisa? Hidiach mai. What is the malacha if he rinses it? Omar Rabbi Yosef hidiach chayav chatas. Certainly, it's a malacha of bishul. He's chayav chatas. Omar mar beri darvina. Afanana mitanina. We seem to have a raya to this concept from our very Mishnah. Chutz moliach hayoshan. V'kul is spun, so you can't rinse these two types of fish. Shadachasan zuyigmar melachton. Because rinsing them is considered to doing the gemar malacha, which means that he's doing a malacha. Which malacha? Malacha of bishul. Shema mina. Indeed, we hear from here that it's not merely an isser, it's a rabbanan, it's actually a malacha derais. Continues the Gemara, Yosef Rav Chia bar Abba, Rav Asi. So they two were sitting kamed Rav Yechanan, in front of Rav Yechanan. Yosef Rav Yechanan kamenamnim. Rav Yechanan was dozing off. So they took the opportunity to discuss something. Amalei Rav Chia bar Abba Rav Asi. So he turned to Rav Asi and he asked him 4 questions. Number 1, why do we find that the birds, the fowl in Bavel are actually more plump and higher quality than the ones found in Eretz Yisrael? Amalei, so Rav Asi responded, not so soon. Klach l'midbar Aza. Go to Midbar Aza. Ve'erech shmeinim hem. I'll show you birds which are even more plump than the ones in Bavel. Second question. Why do we find that the Yom Tovim in Bavel are considered to be extraordinarily joyous events, even greater than Eretz Yisrael? So he told me, you know why? Because in Bavel they're poor, and the Yom Tovim afford them the opportunity to enjoy food and drink, to have a rest from their work. So all their simcha from their entire year is concentrated, is celebrated and observed during the Yom Tovim. Third question was, why do we find that the Talmidei Chacham in Bavel are dressed and adorned with elegant clothing? He told them because they're not considered to be proper Bnei Torah. They don't have the same level of scholarship as the Bnei Eretz Yisrael. They're not considered to be Bnei Torah, and therefore they need to adorn themselves with elegant clothing to garner respect and covet on account of their attire, rather than their scholarship. The fourth question was, why are the Gentiles mizuhamim? They have impurity. We're speaking about spiritual impurity, and their answer is, so he told them, since they eat all these various creatures, which imbue them with this impurity. So 4 questions with 4 responses. Says so Rav Yochanan woke up, and he turned to them. He told them, youngsters, didn't I already tell you? Tell Chachma, you're my sister. What's the connection between Chachma and Achosi? We learn like this. If the Torah is clear to you, just like the halacha, that Achoischa she'asur lach, like your sister which is asa to you, then say it. So if it's clear to you, if you have full grasp, then fine, you can say it. But if it's not clear to you, don't say it. Meaning, apparently he disapproved. He overheard during his dozing this conversation, and he disapproved regarding the responses here. So Amarle, so they told him, so you, master, you please tell us, Azaman, tell us some of the answers. So he began. He told them like this regarding the first question: why are the Oifos in Bavel more plump than the ones in Eretz Yisrael? Because they never went into exile. Therefore, they developed into more plump and higher quality creatures. Shenemar Sha'anan Moyav ben Urav. So Moyav is tranquil from its youth. V'shakatu al Shmarav. Ubegad never went to exile, and the pasuk concludes there. Therefore, it maintained its flavor, its taste. So going into exile makes it lose its quality. And the Oifas in Babel never experienced that, as opposed to the Oifas of Eretz Yisrael, who were sent into exile, and as a result, they lost their quality. Here, meaning the Oifas of Eretz Yisrael, what do we know? How do we know that they went into Golus as well? The Sanis went into the Brayso. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Nun Beis Shana, for 52 years, lo yovar ish v'Yehuda. There wasn't a person who trespassed, who passed through the land of Yehuda. It was completely, totally desolate. Shenema ala harim nasa bechi, on the mountains I will raise my voice and crying, so everybody, from the Oif HaShamayim until the Behema, they wandered and they left. Now, for how many years? So we learn a gematria. Behema, the word behema is the gematria, its numerical value is 52 years. So it's very clear that for this period of 52 years, there was a comprehensive, all-encompassing exile golus that took place, even for the behemoths and the oifas. Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi Yechanan, kulon chazru. Everybody, all of them, the behemoths, even the fish, the birds, they all returned back to Eretz Yisrael after this period, except for one. Chutz mikulis ha'ispan, and this type of fish. Why? The Amar Rav, because Rav told us Hani Medari the Bavel, these slopes of water in Bavel, these streams. Mahadri Mai Ein Itam. They returned that water back to Eretz Yisrael. This was a spring called Ein Itam near the Beis Hamikdash. So the water travels back through underground tunnels and passageways. It makes its way back to Eretz Yisrael. So the fish traveled through that route. They made their way back to Eretz Yisrael. Except for this specific fish. Vahai, this Kulias Aspan, couldn't make its way back. Why? Since its shedra, its spine is not strong enough, it couldn't work its way back, and therefore it never made it back to Eretz Yisrael. Okay, let's proceed with the second question. So why are the Yom Tovim in Bavel extraordinarily joyous moments and occasions? Since they weren't included in the curse, in the klala, which was applied to Yom Tovim Eretz Yisrael, as it says, so Hashem is saying, I'm going to terminate all its joy, chaga, chadosha, v'shabbata, so the Yom Tovim, the new months, the Shabbat, kol mayada, uksiv chadshechem, umayadechem, sana nafshi, I hated, I despised, hoylei l'toyrach, they were on me as a burden. So since the Yom Tovim Eretz Yisrael had a klala applied to them, so they were affected by that klala, and the Yom Tovim in Bavel are celebrated with a greater level of joy. Now, what does it mean? They were on me a burden. Hashem said, Lo Yidayin Yisrael. It's not sufficient. It's not enough for Klal Yisrael shechaytin lefanai. They do averos before me. Elo shematrichen oisi. They also burden me later to figure out which type of evil decree I'll bring upon them as a retribution. So in any case, the point here is that the Yom Tovim of Bavel are celebrated with more simcha because they were not affected by the klal. In fact, says the Gemara, Omer Rav Yitzchak, ein lecha kol regel v'regel. Not a single Yom Tov passes shalei basa b'leshes l'tzipori, that a b'leshes, a troop which comes to plunder and to loot, has not arrived and not visited tzipori as a result of this klal. V'amar Chanina, ein lecha kol regel v'regel. There isn't even one Yom Tov shalei bo l'tveria. Agma and V'katma and Balzmar, different types of officials and represented authorities, which come to make trouble and post taxes and plunder. So Tveria would suffer on a Yom Tov, and again, this is as a result of the Gzerah, of the Klal. The third question was, why are they dressed so elegantly? Not because they're not Bnei Torah, but rather because they're out of their natural habitat. They're out of place. They were Goyla, they went to Bavel, and therefore they require wearing this elegant attire. Why? I'm ishi, because people say, B'masa, when I'm in my local, my city, Shamai, then I'm known simply by my name. I don't need to impress anybody. But Masa, when I'm out of town, Toisvoi, then I need to impress, I get my cover, my recognition, as a result of my attire, my clothing. So these Talmid Chachamim were out of place, they're in Bavel, they were going from Eretz to Bavel, they need to dress elegantly as a result of this. But they're still Bnei Torah, they're men of very high scholarship and high stature. As we see in the following Gemara Haboim, Yashish Yaakov, so those that are coming, Yashish Yaakov Yotzitz Uparach Yisrael. Yotzitz means bud, Uparach blossom Yisrael. Rabbi Yosef, what is this pasuk referring to? Elu Talmid Chachamim shebeBavel. It's referring to the Talmid Chachamim, which went begolas from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, that they're very great. She'oisim tzitzim u'prachim l'Torah. They create tzitzim u'prachim, buds and blossoms for the Torah. They immerse themselves in the Torah. They expound on the Torah. So this supports Rabbi Yochanan, who maintains that they were men of high stature. The reason why they wear these elegant clothing was because of the reason that he mentioned before, because they're out of their location. The fourth question was, why are the Gentiles mizuhamin? Why they have impurity? The reason is, Rabbi Yochanan said, Har Sinai, because they were not present by Har Sinai. What is the relation to that? So when the first Nachash, he had relations with Chava, Rashi brings that when he gave her the Eitzah, the advice to eat from the Eitzah Das, he actually had tashmish with her. The Pasha says, Hanochas hishi ani loshan nisuin. So at that point, at that moment, hitaba zuma, he embedded in her a zuma and purity. Now, until when was that zuma present? Yisrael shamdal Har Sinai, Yisrael who were present by Har Sinai, paskos amasan. Their zuma terminated, was removed, as Rashi brings, all types of physical and spiritual sicknesses and ailments were healed, were removed by Har Sinai, and likewise this impurity was removed, they were cleansed. In contrast with the Goyim who were not by Har Sinai, their zuma was not removed. What are we going to say regarding converts? It seems that they weren't by Har Sinai. How was their impurity removed? Rashi responded, although they themselves were not present, their mazel, their neshama was present there, and as a result of that, they were cleansed of their impurity. So it's profound here that the point that a ger becomes a ger later on, but really his neshama, his mazel, was present by Har Sinai. Amazing. So how do we know that the mazel was by Har Sinai? The chsiv, as it says, Moshe is telling Klal Yisrael, those that are present with us today, even those that are not here. So the covenant, the bris, the Torah was related and applied to all, even those that aren't physically here, since their neshama, their mazel, is present. Says the Gemara, this notion, this contention that the zuma was cleansed by Har Sinai is in dispute to Rav Abba bar Kahana, who says that actually it left them much earlier in history. Until 3 generations, but only until 3 generations, the zuma was still present. Avram gave birth to Ishmael, who was considered to be his impurity, his zuma. Likewise, Yitzchak gave birth to Esav, who was considered to be his element of impurity. But once it came to Yaakov, the 3rd generation of our ancestors, they were totally cleansed and purified. There was no more Zoma, Yaakov, Hoylid, Yudvei, Shvatim. Indeed, he gave birth to 12 Shvatim who were whole and complete and totally pure. Shaloi ben Shum Daifi, which there was nothing, no Daifi, nothing improper, nothing impure, nothing lacking in them. So the Zoma was completely removed and Klal Yisrael was completely cleansed from the impurities already way back at the time of Yaakov Avinu. Okay, time for a brief review of today's daf. Rav taught us that mashkin habolo oichel, it's being squeezed into a food. That juice is not considered to be a beverage, a mashka, rather it is regarded as an oichel. Regarding juice which is bali ibud, which is going to waste, going to be discarded, is that a mashka? We have machlekes. What about balat tzachtzach? It's coming to merely add shine to the crust of this bread. We have machlekes there as well. We had a 3-way machlekes regarding squeezing vegetables. We have kvashim, pickled vegetables. We have shlokes, boiled vegetables. The Gemara said squeezing a fish for the sake of its brine is also regarded in the same category as the shlokes. So we have a 3-way machlekes. Now all agree, one may squeeze these things fun to soften them for the sake of the item itself. There's no concern. What about l'meimein if his intent is to extract the juice? So Rav says, kvashim, pickled vegetables, l'meimein, squeezing them for their sake of their juice is a asur. But shlokais, one can do so lechatchila because the juice, the vegetable juice there, is regarded merely as an oichel. He's separating food from food without any concern. Shmuel says, kvash and shlokais, if he's squeezing them for the sake of their juice, it's a asur. Lest he confuse that with squeezing ordinary fruit juice. Rav Yochanan says, in both cases, it's actually chayav chatas. It's regarded like an ordinary malacha of dash. We concluded that Eid Mipi Eid, second-hand Eidus, is relied upon for Eidus Isha to allow a woman to remarry. Regarding allowing a B'chor, we have a Machlekes. We learned that according to Lezer of Shimon, juice which is flowing from grapes and olives, which are already pre-crushed before Shabbos, is mutar. We learned that certain types of fish cannot even be rinsed on Shabbos. Rabbi Yechon explained to us why in Bavel the Oifes are plumpier, the Mo'adim are happier, and the Talmidei Chacham are dressed elegantly. And we concluded that the Yisrael, as well as the Gerim, who cleansed of their impurity, either at the time of Matan Torah, or in the case of Klal Yisrael, even way earlier, the time of Yaakov Avinu.